Right? You can't control the intake of that corn. There's other issues associated with a horse walking around a cornfield, moldy corn, aflatoxin, all those things that are associated with corn. But specifically for this reason, my recommendation is take the horse off the cornfield, right? So that's the big one that you want to do. You want to limit the intake of that corn in that horse's diet. You know, as was mentioned before, you know, the starch and sugar in a horse's diet can cause increased levels of starch and sugar in a horse's diet can cause insulin dysregulation, which in turn can cause laminitis, which is exactly what's happening in this horse. I mean, this is a perfect clinical example of what's happening. So what do you feed this horse? I think that all depends on a number of different things. What is this horse doing for a living? What's the body condition score of the horse? What's the body weight of the horse? All of those different components go into what you feed that horse. But in terms of how you fix this problem, you take that horse off of the cornfield, you take all of the horses off of that cornfield, or you limit their intake. You put a grazing muzzle on. Muzzles are not torture for your horse, I promise. I've watched horses consume an incredible amount of everything while they're wearing a muzzle. So I would absolutely recommend taking that horse off of this pasture, putting them somewhere else, giving them a different source of forage, because corn is not a forage source. Horses should not be foraging on the corn. So if you guys have anything else to add for that. And there's other risk factors with that too, like choke, stabbing themselves in the throat with corn stalks. So.
I would, the only other part of that question had said luckily the other horses didn't develop laminitis. Maybe they didn't develop clinical laminitis, but I would suspect that there was some subclinical changes in some of the other horses too. So he's totally right in that all the horses, not just the one that's showing symptoms, need to come off the corn.
I'll take the fat question. So the main driver of weight in a horse is the amount of calories it's taken in. So if you like food, you eat a lot of food, you're going to be happy. So the horse, and then there's some differences in metabolism between horses. So there's our easy keepers, but the only way to get them to lose weight is to decrease their calorie intake or increase their exercise. And so, and it really starts with knowing what that horse is taking in at this point to get her to her weight. And so once you know that level, then you can figure out, well, how much do we have to decrease this by to get her to lose weight? And a lot of times it's a significant amount. So I mean, we have horses that are overweight that need to lose weight, and sometimes they're getting maybe 10 to maybe 15 pounds of hay plus a concentrate that has mineral in it to get them to lose weight. And so, which isn't a lot of feed when you start weighing it out. And it's really difficult to get people to feed that amount of feed because they want to feed their horses way more than that because they're trying to do the best thing for the horse. But really, when they're overweight like that, it's slowly killing the horse in the long run.
How do you feed a horse like that when you're trying to do this long-term feeding all the time? I mean, like, hang down.
So yeah, so if you just throw a flake of hay in there morning and night, and it's gone in 5 minutes. So that is a challenge. I mean, there are ways. There's feed nets, and the ones that I think are the best right now are the ones that you would see in a trailer that have the square meshes in them that are kind of heavier. They tend to slow it down more than other nets, or they destroy the nets and they're a little more durable. So there's ways to just try to slow that horse's intake in, but you're right, the horse is going to have longer periods of time during the day that it doesn't have forage in front of it, which then it's the lesser of two evils. So, yeah.
Well, another thing too.
So I'll start and we'll kind of pass it around. The first thing I would say is at age 28, forage intake is an issue. So probably not getting a lot out of it, and mentioned that he wouldn't eat grass hay at all and maybe just eating the leaves off of the alfalfa. So not getting a lot of forage at 28, even if he is intaking it. The other piece of that I will address is 3/4 of a scoop and that's a whole nother talk for a whole nother day, is the million different sizes of scoops that we're talking about. I mean, is it a cup, or is it, you know, a huge coffee can? What are we talking about? I don't really know. But basically, equine senior, to be fed as a complete feed, like Dr. Conover talked about, to be fed at a complete feed needs to be fed at about 14 to 16 pounds per head per day. So we're not anywhere close to that with what we're talking about, 3/4 of a scoop. I'm going to estimate we're maybe at 5 or 6 pounds with what she's talking about here. So to replace the hay or the forage in the diet, yes, we need to be feeding more equine senior. And even more so important than weight would be making sure that the hindgut of that horse stays happy, because that's what forage is all about. So the forage is what feeds the bugs in the hindgut, keeps it happy, keeps things moving. One of the ways we can avoid colic, if we're not getting enough indigestible fiber or forage to that hindgut, then we're going to have some issues down the road.
The other thing I would add to that is checking out to see what that horse's teeth are like. So at 28, there may not be a lot that we can do to help that horse if it's had, especially if it's had good dental care throughout its life. But if it's due for a dental, or at least you know, a good oral exam to see what's going on in that mouth, and if there is anything that we can do to help it process hay better.
I think that, again, like to kind of pigtail on that, so age plays a little bit of a role in it, but I think the biggest thing to look at in that horse, these two mares, is body condition score. So a lot comes into play with that, but if that horse has good teeth and is able to maintain body condition score, this conversation goes a different way than a horse that has poor teeth. And we have two mares similar ages, we may have totally different diets for them. And so I think the first thing to do, body condition score, oral exam, and then the supplement question, Dr. Black kind of touched on that too. Like, there are so many different supplements that it's hard to keep abreast of all of the new ones, and it's also hard to say this is what a 27-year-old horse needs. May not need any supplement, may need a change in diet or environment or something like that.
Well, I'll just start and say, again, body condition score. If the 6-year-old is in good body condition score, getting the 1 pound a day of Enrich Plus, carry on. My theory there is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If he's maintaining weight and doing well, you're providing the nutrients that he needs in his diet, everything's good. And I'm just going to say ditto on the supplements. I mean, we don't know if there's anything there he would benefit from, I guess, without looking at the individual.
So the one thing that they did mention was Adequan. So Adequan would be a supplement to a certain extent, but it's an FDA approved product, so it has a lot of research behind it. So when we talk about supplements that are nutraceuticals versus something that's gone through the rigors of a trial, there's differences between those. So Adequan is a good product, and it especially on a performance horse that's working, it has a lot of benefit for joint health. So I don't really put that into the same basket as a lot of the oral supplements.
When you feed a horse anything, especially when you're feeding a horse a supplement, when you're deciding what supplements to feed, ask the question on what the research is behind it and evaluate that research. Research has a lot of different kind of, can go all the way, up to FDA certification for the ability to make drug claims for something like Adequan. It can be research like we do at Purina, which is highly intensive, controlled research studies. And then there's research out there is I fed this to the horse, they didn't die. That's my research, right? And it falls through all the entire gamut of that entire spectrum. So what I would say when you're talking about feeding a horse anything, but when you're specifically talking about supplements, look for the research, ask for the research, ask to see the proof, ask to understand how that specific supplement is working, because that can really answer a lot of the questions about what supplement should I feed my horse and things like that.
So we're doing a couple things, relatively small amount, and we're feeding it for a reason, probably for weight or something like that. I think that we have to be a little bit careful with just feeding one thing. Corn, oats, soybean meal specifically, because then if we're only eating, so salad is healthy for us, lettuce is healthy, but if we're only eating lettuce, we're missing out on a lot of vitamin, mineral, and amino acids that could be gathered from the rest of our diet. So I don't know if this is answering your question, Logan, or not, but just feeding corn or oats or whatever specifically, I think that we're missing a bigger opportunity for the diet of that horse, the balance of that horse. Does that make sense?
Yes. My point is there's an awful lot of old kinds of feed hay and corn, and it's got everything it needs. There's going to be a time tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And I think it's affecting the performance and health of the horse.
Right, right. And again, I'm one of you, I'm a horse owner too. So what is one of the biggest things that we as horse owners have to overcome? And it's like tradition. Like my dad did it this way. And you use the term old timers, right? Like, so there's a lot of tradition and a lot of history that has come to that. And maybe they fed 18 horses that way and got them to a ripe old age and they performed well. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best for the horse. Is that okay? Okay.
To me,
All right. So respiratory issue. I'm gonna just assume that we have an allergy, COPD situation. So I'm gonna make that assumption for this conversation. So what are the two biggest offenders? What causes that horse to breathe heavily? Dust and mold. Dust and mold. Two biggest offenders. So in that situation, pelleted hay, a pelleted hay is going to decrease both of those. A lot of the times they're going to be fed as, well, they can be top dressed, but a lot of times they'll even be moistened. And so when they're fed that way, so that is going to help a heavy, allergic COPD horse immensely. So maybe not right for every horse, but definitely benefit that situation.
Let's talk about feed, right? So feed is manufactured in a feed mill. Feed mills are regulated very heavily by the USDA. Depending on where you get your feed from, there's different regulations on how that feed is manufactured. When we talk about sand in feed, I'm right now simply talking solely about Purina's products, as I don't know anything about any other products. And I don't want to talk about any other products negatively, positively. I know we don't formulate sand in our diets. It doesn't help the horse, and that's not what we're going to do. When we're talking about, sand accumulation in a horse, typically they're not getting that sand from their concentrate diets. There is in Purina feeds no sand that is in the feeds. When you look at in a bag of feed, there may be something that looks like sand in the bag of feed. That's called fines. That's what happens when a pellet breaks down a little bit. We do a lot of work to understand why pellets do that. But in terms of sand specifically, the sand that your horse would consume when you're feeding that horse on the ground, when you're feeding that horse out in different pastures, when your horse is just outside consuming sand, that then becomes a medical issue. And I will absolutely turn it over to your veterinarians to talk about how you clear sand from that horse's gut. But as it relates to sand being ingested from the pelleted diets that you feed your horse, from Purina, that's not going to be a problem. We do an extensive amount of testing on all the ingredients that we bring into our plants, that go into our feeds, and then go into the individual bags. So again, not a commercial for Purina, just kind of an understanding of how those products are formulated, how those products are manufactured. You're not going to get sand out of your bag of Purina feed. Now, that's not to say your horse will not eat sand, right? Horses eat sand for a variety of reasons, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And once that happens, These are the people that you want to talk to about sand colic and sand accumulation.
So I'm glad he gave me that question because the whole why horses get sand colic or sand accumulation in their large colon. I don't know if I can tell you why that is because I don't know if anybody can because it's not very well understood why a particular horse will do it with 10 other horses and none of the other horses done it and they're eating in the same spot.
Can you get it out?
So there's basically two ways to get it out. If it's causing a problem, one is surgery where they actually remove it surgically, which is probably not, in my opinion, the best way, but most of the time it's done through a medical ways of fluids and there's some feed products that will help them move through. So the one thing I never have understood about sand colics or sand problems is why you have one horse that does it and then a bunch of that do not get it. And I think some of it's a vice because we see it too where people get sand delivered in an arena and all of a sudden one horse is over there chomping it down. And so it's something new to that horse's environment and for whatever reason they like it. So that's the one caution I would say was if you have horses in an arena or something, you need to watch them a little bit when you add sand to that because some horses will find it pleasurable to eat, I guess.
Yeah, so I guess two parts of the question, right? Feed labels, right? Feed labels tell you a whole lot of stuff. They don't tell you a whole lot of stuff. Feed labels are literally going to tell you what that feed is designed for, the purpose statement on that feed label. It's going to tell you where that feed was manufactured. It's going to give you a guaranteed analysis with maximums or minimums for certain nutrients, and it's going to give you an ingredient list. Whether that's an inclusive ingredient list, and by inclusive I mean a very detailed ingredient list, or one that includes groups of ingredients, is up to the individual feed company. Moving forward from that question is, can that horse absorb and utilize the nutrients that horse is being fed? And that's a really good question. It's very specific and very unique to each of the individual horses. When we talk about the horse's ability to utilize nutrients, it's a factor of a lot of different things, and it's a factor of all the things we've been talking about tonight. Can the horse chew? Right? If the horse can't chew, they're not going to be able to utilize the nutrients that are in long stem hay. So absolutely not. If they can't chew, they may not be able to utilize the nutrients that are in certain pellets. Right? If they can't break down that pellet in their mouth, once it gets into the stomach, it's very hard for that pellet to be fully digested as it moves to the entire digestive tract of that horse. So the ability of a horse to utilize and absorb those nutrients is very different. The sources of nutrients, as was mentioned previously, all sources of nutrients are not the same. Right? When you do the research and you understand, does a certain form of a nutrient make a difference as it relates to absorption, that's a very important question. Here we did a lot of research as it related specifically to chelated minerals. We've heard of chelated minerals before. Right? So this is a different form of providing a mineral to your horse. We found in our research, this is extensive research, that it didn't matter if it was a chelated mineral or an inorganic mineral source. The horse was able to utilize what they needed, and they were not utilizing what they didn't need. So they were able to meet their nutrient needs through the utilization of those specific ingredient sources that were there. So the other question is, how does processing affect the nutrient utilization in the horse? And that's a really good question, and one that we've asked a whole lot at Purina. We do a lot of work in our process research to understand if we process a feed and we develop a feed as a pellet, if we develop a feed as an extruded nugget, if we develop a feed as a big pellet or a small pellet or whatever it is, the shape, size, all those different things, the hardness of a pellet, how does that impact absorption? So one of the cool studies that we did was when we were developing Equine Senior, right? A feed designed for senior horses. Right, the more that you have a horse that potentially has an inability to absorb certain nutrients, right? If you make those nutrients more available, is that good for the horse? So we made the formula and we developed it into a pellet and into an extruded nugget. So the exact same ingredients, exact same formula, except one we made a pellet and one we made as an extruded nugget. The horse was able to utilize the nutrients, and the nutrients were more digestible as a pellet. That's why Equine Senior is a pellet. When we talk about other feeds like weight control, well-solved weight control, which is a feed that's designed to be fed in a larger amount, low qualities for that more, what do we call it? Hefty, healthy, bigger, fatter horse, right? Your horses aren't fat, they're healthy. When you extrude that, the horse is able to fill their gut a little bit more with that extruded particle. They're still able to utilize those nutrients, but that gut fill is a little bit more. So absolutely, the way that feed is processed makes a large difference in how that horse is able to utilize those nutrients. And that's something that we spend a lot of time doing a lot of research on. So.